haven't made a video in, I think it's been over 3 months now, but this was simply too important to not talk about. And it's nothing short of disgraceful. Yesterday, on May 7th, 2024, Microsoft announced that they were closing 4 Bethesda Studios: Tango Gameworks, Alpha Dog Games, Roundhouse Studios, and Arkane Austin. And some of these, if you look at the official statements that came from Microsoft, they're not even getting moved around. Some of these team members, it's not just layoffs. These studios are entirely closing, and some of these team members are not getting redistributed, rearranged, moved to different teams. None of that stuff. You look at what I believe it was from Matt Booty, what Matt Booty officially said about, for example, Arkane Austin. They said, yeah, some team members will move around. And you look at the same statement, what they said about Tango. They said, oh, it's been great working with these guys. Sorry, not enough room. The time zone difference, it's not going to work out. You guys got to get out of here. Sorry. Hi-Fi Rush? Oh, we loved Hi-Fi Rush. It met all of our expectations. It was great. It was wonderful. We loved it. But, yeah, get out.
Congratulations, sir. You have just given me my $1 million.
Huh, great. What do I win?
Nothing. Now get out.
What?
Get the fuck out.
Closing these studios, absolutely disgraceful. And there's so many reasons for it. There are tons of reasons. I'm not necessarily going to bring up anything prophetic or new or novel that maybe a couple things you might have heard before. There's one tidbit I'm excited to talk about in relation to the Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 5, that some of you are probably going to want to stick around and hear my thoughts on that, because I haven't heard anyone bring it up from the perspective I'll bring. But what I will say is absolutely terrifying for of course, I have to say first and foremost, the employees that are getting affected by this, the individual lives who have husbands, wives, children, girlfriends, boyfriends, houses, insurance payments, car payments, life, that have to go through life. It doesn't just stop because all of these people are getting canned by factors completely out of their control. So all these individuals, my heart absolutely goes out to every single one. Those who might have been working on drafting ideas for their next project, because I would like to believe that Arkane Austin, yeah, Redfall, look, I'm not even one of those people who was going to turn around and say that I thought Redfall was going to have this massive redemption arc. If I'm being honest, I never felt as though the bones were there for Redfall to turn around the way it needed to. Similar to how I feel about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which released recently. But I digress. Redfall, the team at Arkane Austin, I have a hard time believing that they were not drafting ideas, coming up with ideas for some of their future projects. And I hope, as annoying as I will be to hear about it, yeah, we were working on this cool thing, here's some concept art we had, it's super awesome, you'll never get to play it. As depressing as that will be, if and when that might happen, we'll never get to see it now.
One thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. I'm a huge supporter of Arkane Austin. Their track record is awesome. I love a lot of the great games that they've built. They're a very talented team. I love that team, and I still do.
They are just gone. They're just kapoosh, poof, out of here. And what does that mean for the future of some of these Xbox studios when they have a title that doesn't sell well? What would it mean for a studio like Machine Games, who previously released Wolfenstein Youngblood, and that didn't do very well? If they weren't working on Indiana Jones, would they have gotten the boot too? Thank God it is spared, who I believe is working on the next Doom title, but are they just too far in development? Microsoft said, you know what, Doom, it's just too far along. Get that sucker out. And what happens after that game releases? My heart absolutely goes out. I need to make this abundantly clear because I know there's going to be people who try to spin this in some toxic, horrible way. Any rational person will understand where I'm coming from, and that is, my heart goes out to every single one of these people that are affected, these talented, hardworking, passionate developers behind some phenomenal projects. Tango Gameworks with The Evil Within, Alpha Dog Games, which, aside from the microtransactions that were involved, Tiny Doom or Mighty Doom was actually a pretty good game. It was just marred by some of the greed that was implemented into it. Presumably not by Alpha Dog. I doubt that they said, yeah, let's gatewall by payments, all the gameplay in the title. Highly doubt that. From Arkane Austin, who released my favorite immersive sim of all time, Prey. Now we'll never see a sequel. Prey 2 is just completely... I wasn't optimistic for a long time that we'd get one, but now, probably not in my lifetime. We'd have to wait for another reboot of Prey, if that even ever happens. But how do these team members go into their office day after day after day? As they're watching, they're looking at their window of their coworkers carrying boxes out of the office. I know they're located physically in different studios, but you see all this going on. You see on Twitter all of your friends and coworkers and companions, people you might have collaborated with, walking out the door. I just got fired. I just got laid off. And they have to come into work wondering, I hope I'm not next. Man, I hope Indiana Jones does well. What about the other studios? Do people at Obsidian feel safe? I wouldn't blame them if they don't. They're currently working hard on Avowed, which, if you've seen some of the reception for Avowed, it's been pretty mixed. Some people like it, some people hate it. I understand both sides, why they're excited and why they're not. And you see them working on it like, please be good, please be good. I'm writing like a pen. They'd be coding on their computer. Maybe they're drawing, sketching some concept art. I don't know. Are they going into work excited? No. Burdened with stress. How are they supposed to effectively work in that environment and make great products? These games, I've said it before, I'll always say it. It's a miracle that video games get made at all. It really is. The amount of effort and intelligence and knowledge and passion and skill that goes into creating these things, and teamwork and collaboration is monumental. But how do you work when the people you're collaborating with are constantly getting fired? As I channel my inner Angry Joe. When just in January, Microsoft laid off 10,000 people, when across the industry, people are getting laid off frequently. When Microsoft themselves, after the Blizzard acquisition that they paid gobs of money for, too much seemingly for their pockets to afford. Oh, but how much did Microsoft made? Q3 2024, which ended March 31st. Total revenue, $61.9 billion, a 17% increase. Operating income, $27.6 billion, a 23% increase. Net income, $21.9 billion. But you can't afford to keep these studios open. It's for your strategy, your ongoing strategy and commitment to good games, besides the ones that'll never get made anymore. And studios are watching this wondering, man, I hope this game sells well. It's despicable. It's disgraceful. And there's further reaching consequences as well, even beyond that. What about other future projects like another Hi-Fi Rush sometime in the future? Or a game like that, or Grounded, or Pentiment. These passion projects with a much smaller budget that are getting released with critical and consumer acclaim that people are loving. When Microsoft talks about how pleased they are with Hi-Fi Rush and its performance at launch that shadow dropped with no marketing, and how great of a game that was for Xbox Game Pass, what happens to those projects? Are we going to get them anymore? Or is it only going to be the major IPs, Halo, Call of Duty, Gears of War, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and those are the franchises you get? Any creativity is too risky. Can't afford to do that. So screw all your creative ideas. You're working on Elder Scrolls now. Speaking of Elder Scrolls, why don't we talk about that? The idea that I had that you might not have heard people talk about this, but some of these team members, Arkane Austin, primarily because they're located close to where Arkane or Bethesda Austin is, the team that worked on Fallout 76 primarily, I'm sure helped out a lot with Starfield and a lot of other projects. Many of those Arkane staff members, or hopefully many of them, I think the official statement said some, whatever that means, because Microsoft didn't say how many people are getting laid off. Some of those team members will be working on, presumably with Bethesda Game Studios and their Austin studio. But look at Starfield. Starfield, which had more development time, more team members, more budget, more support, because of course Microsoft was backing them during that process to help. They were lending QA testers up the wazoo to make sure that this game came out polished, which, to their credit, it did. But you had all of this support, this gigantic team that was all working together. You'd think, hey, they can make the best damn Bethesda game they've ever made. And I would argue that the majority of people don't agree with that. That Starfield, yeah, it's fine. Some people hate it. Some people love it. Objectively speaking, I think you could say at the very least that it is divisive. More divisive than I would say even that of Fallout 4. Which, to my memory, when that game released, a lot of people had said, well, it's a good game, just not a great Fallout game. It's a good game, not a great Fallout game. And that was with less team members. My point being that adding more staff and beefing things up doesn't lead to necessarily a better project. Doesn't lead to a better release. And we've seen that proved with a lot of these AA releases. We've seen that proved with Pentiment and Grounded and Hi-Fi Rush Studios directly within Microsoft that they just fired. So now we look to these studios that are growing and getting bigger and more team members coming on board, and we're supposed to think that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be this amazing, phenomenal, stellar project that everyone's going to love unanimously. And obviously that's kind of impossible for any game release in 2024. It's just how things are going, which is also really frustrating about being a fan of gaming in general. It's getting harder in some ways, especially for those, mostly for those involved in the space the way I, or those of you watching this video are. But it has not been proven that that will be the case, that Elder Scrolls 6, because it has more team members. In fact, team members have left. You have folks like Jeff Gardner, you have folks like Will Shen, like Nate Perkapile. That's just 3. There's many, many, many other team members who are gone from Bethesda. I'm sure some of you can bring them up in the comments below. Team members that are no longer working at Bethesda, and maybe not all of them, and this might not be the sole reason for it. I'm sure there were many, many reasons. But one of them, distinctively, I would be surprised if it wasn't the case for a lot of these people, was because the company was just getting too big and too corporate. Should people be excited for the Elder Scrolls 6? Optimistically, yes. But does the bigger team, when that starts coming around, I'm sure when it gets closer and Bethesda starts talking about it a little more, I'm sure we'll see, well, it's going to be the biggest game ever. My Bethesda's as big as it's ever been. That doesn't mean jack, unfortunately. And something I didn't talk about, something I didn't mention, is all of these studios getting shut down as well. Why it's so insulting to the people who have poured their hearts and souls into these games, and why it's insulting to just the message across, as a message across the industry, as to what these individuals mean to these companies, is because you look at, for example, it was when the first round of layoffs started going around with Microsoft, and Phil Spencer, I believe, took a 10% pay raise, and they paid Bobby Kotick, when they paid him approximately $400 million to get out, $400 million to leave. And there was some napkin math I saw online, and I didn't verify, I didn't fact check this, but allegedly speaking, for 17 years, they could have kept on all of these companies. Take a quarter of that. A quarter of that. A third. Make it easy. About 5 years. To make at least one new game. To see what could have came for the money that they paid for Bobby Kotick to get out of the company. And that is why it hurts so much. Or part of the reason. It's not the reason. There's many other reasons, as I've been explaining. It's sickening. It's sickening. And I'm also curious as to why Microsoft didn't try to maybe sell off some of these studios. I'm sure even if another company bought them, there still would have been late layoffs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, for example, all of Tango had to just go. They could have sold the studio and sold the IP and seen. Did they even try? Did they try? Was it a discussion that was had? At the very least, I hope so. And then maybe we could have seen a Prey 2 or an Evil Within 3. But unfortunately, Prey might have been complicated because of Arkane Leon and the connection there. I'm not too sure, but you get my point. Was that even a consideration for them before just terminating all these jobs? We'll never find out. We'll absolutely never find out. It's hard. It's stressful to be excited about games. Oh, and I don't think I even mentioned, did I mention at any point about Tango Gameworks as well? that Microsoft is rooting to get all these, they want more Japanese games in their portfolio underneath their umbrella. And when they have a studio, that was the whole point of Ghostwire Tokyo, because they wanted something that was close to home for them. When you had the father of survival horror, Shinji Mikami, who started that studio, more Japanese games, more. And then they get rid of the one studio they have. So much for their promise and commitment to Japanese games, right, Microsoft? The one positive takeaway, if any, that is, I simply hope we continue to see this rise in AA games, something like Manor Lords, or indie games, something like Manor Lords, which was frequently on top seller lists and reaching the top of Steam charts, and Hades 2, I think, is now on the best sellers list, another indie game as well, and to continue to see those types of projects grow and flourish. And I would love to see some of these people affected find themselves in those positions, working for those studios, making new, great, passionate experiences. Of course, budgets and money and finance and funding, that's always going to be a part of it when you enter any industry or any business, period, but free from some of the corporate restraints and the mismanagement, the pure and simple mismanagement and the corporate deals like $400 million exit salaries. And they could be free of that. And there's another comment I want to make as well, because I have heard, and we had this discussion on the Renegade Realm podcast, I've heard it from other people as well, folks saying, well, we need to go out and buy these games more, right? You know, there's the argument, well, Microsoft Game Pass isn't sustainable, and we need to go out and we need to buy and pay, pay for these games. But it's not my responsibility, and it's not your responsibility as a consumer either to pay for these games, to pay to support these studios. Yes, we want to support games that we like, but when a company, a corporate entity comes out and says, hey, well, we need you to buy our microtransactions so that we can stay in business, that's not my job. My job is to consume products I enjoy and to enjoy games. That is my responsibility. I am a consumer of your product. It is not to financially support your studio. In fact, it's the other way around. If you're owned by those corporate entities or these larger companies, they should be supporting you to allow you to make great products that sell well because they're great products. Not me buying them so that we get into this mentality of, well, I'm supporting you and I'm helping you stay afloat. Because it doesn't matter. I don't think that endless sales of Hi-Fi Rush would have made a difference here. So I just wanted to make sure that I raised that point as well, because I do see those statements being made, and it's not our obligation. I hope Avowed does well. I hope Hellblade 2 does well, because is that the world that Microsoft lives in now? Is that, remember when we were making these comments and jokes about EA closing every single studio? And now we're reliving it. History really does repeat itself in a really dramatic and ironic thread of fate. Like the Fallout TV show that just released, talking about how companies and big, massive corporations are using the end of the world and people's lives as a product. Or Hi-Fi Rush, which talked about had a team of individuals coming together to stop the corporation, which was sucking the life and soul out of art and creativity and all that stuff. Microsoft has proved both of those right. And like in Fallout, like war, greed never changes.